Hello, Pastor Taylor here from Christ Lutheran Church. Today in our text, we meet the children of Israel, and they are complaining. And you're probably thinking to yourself, what's new? It seems like every time we meet the children of Israel, they are complaining about something. They have a need. They don't trust that God is going to take care of that need. So they make outrageous statements against God, against God's leaders. And sadly, that sounds all too typical for us too. We have needs. We don't trust God to take care of those needs, and then we make outrageous statements against God or against leaders, against pastors who make and declare God's promises. Well, Moses was told to speak to a rock. They needed water, so Moses was told to speak to a rock and water would flow. But he didn't do that. He first lectured the people with an attitude of anger and contempt. He was so fed up with them, and I know. He probably had at least 100 reasons why that was a good idea to do, but he didn't have a single excuse why he was justified in doing it. He even added, "May we bring water from this rock," as if he and God were the cause for water from the rock. And he didn't speak to the rock. He struck it, not once, but twice. He was mad. And to think God still provided. God still provided through his imperfect leader who was frustrated. He didn't hold back in providing from his people water. Again, does that sound familiar to you? You get angry and frustrated at the people you're called to provide. You lecture them, you give it to them. And while God shouldn't provide, he still does. Well, there was consequences for Moses' actions. He was not going to be the one to bring the children of Israel into the promised land of Canaan. Someone else would. And yes, we have to deal with the consequences of our anger and frustration too. And yet, what covered over Moses' sin is the same thing that covers over ours, and that's Jesus' redemptive work. While Moses was refused entry into the promised land of Canaan, he was not refused entry into the promised land of heaven. And by God's grace in Jesus Christ, through faith in him, the promised land of heaven is open to us too. A lesson from Numbers, chapter 20, beginning at verse 2. Now there was no water for the community, and the people gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron. They quarreled with Moses and said, "If only we had died when our brothers fell dead before the Lord. Why did you bring the Lord's community into this wilderness, that we and our livestock should die here? Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to this terrible place? It has no grain or figs, grapevines or pomegranates, and there's no water to drink." Moses and Aaron went from the assembly to the entrance to the tent of meeting and fell face down, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. The Lord said to Moses, "Take the staff, and you and your brother Aaron gather the assembly together. Speak to that rock before their eyes, and it will pour out its water. You will bring water out of the rock for the community so they and their livestock can drink." So Moses took the staff from the Lord's presence, just as he commanded him. He and Aaron gathered the assembly together in front of the rock, and Moses said to them, "Listen, you rebels, must we bring you water out of this rock?" Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out, and the community and their livestock drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." The word of the Lord.